God's coming to town, do your laundry. So now we're going to answer the question, what is Shavuot? Thank you for asking. I'm delighted to talk about this holiday. Shavuot is a holiday that's mentioned in the Torah. Among other places, it's mentioned in the book of Exodus or Shmot, in chapter 34, verse 22. V'chag Shavuot ta'aseh that you shall observe a festival of weeks. Shavuot means weeks. And let's see, Bikorei Katsir Hitim. It is the first fruits of wheat. It's the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Like I said, the word Shavuot is Hebrew for weeks. So Chag HaShavuot is feast or festival of weeks. And many translations, you might see it the Feast of Weeks. You might have also heard the word Pentecost. This is a word that Jews of the Hellenistic period used when many of them were speaking Greek as their vernacular language. Pentecost means 50 something. And so Shavuot is always celebrated 50 days after the holiday or after the beginning of the holiday of Pesach or Passover. Right after Passover starts, we start this period of Omer. We count the Omer for a week of weeks. That is 49 days. So 7 times 7. So starting right after Passover, every day we count 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and so on. We count Omer or sheaves of barley, whereas Passover was a holiday that coincided with the barley harvest. Shavuot is the holiday that coincides with the wheat harvest, which happened approximately 50 days after the barley harvest started. So we count 49 days. Then on the 50th day, we celebrate Shavuot. Now, in the Torah, again, it mentions this specifically as the time of reaping of wheat. You start cutting your wheat and you make an offering of the first fruits, or rather the first stuff that you're getting out of your wheat harvest, which is a real act of faith. Like, you don't know what your harvest is going to be like, and you take your first stuff and give it to God. That's saying something. Like, whatever we get first, God gets some, and then we'll see what we have left over. That is an act of faith. And so throughout the Torah, this holiday, this Feast of Weeks, this festival that we have a week of weeks after Passover, is about kind of an agricultural significance. Later in the time of the Talmud, the rabbis are trying to figure out when that when a particular event happened. And I said, oh, it happened around the 6th of Sivan, which just so happens to be 50 days after the 15th of Nisan. And so there was already a harvest festival going on, but they also figured there was something very important that happened on that day also. And that was the revelation of the Torah, or at least the beginning of the revelation of the Torah. As the story goes, we leave Egypt. That's another holiday. That's Passover. We leave Egypt. We walk in the wilderness. And at some point, we just need a book. I don't know if you've ever been on a journey like that, where you're just like, I wish I had a book. But this was more important than that. So when we leave Egypt, we are suddenly free people who have been raised in generations of slavery as urban construction workers, now had the obligation of forming a society that they could govern themselves. And so while we're trying to figure out who we are, we keep asking Moses these questions about everything. Like, oh, is adultery wrong? Is it okay? Like, there was adultery over there. Is it okay if I murder that guy? Is this chicken kosher? All these questions that we had, we kept asking Moses. His father-in-law said, dude, you should delegate. That's another story. But then finally Moses goes to God and says, God, we need something. Give me something here so that I'm not adjudicating these people's questions all day and bothering you with trivialities. Can't you just give us some kind of guide? And so God's like, tell you what I'm going to do. We've been marching for about 49 days now-ish. So what I want you to do is get everybody by that mountain over there. We're in the Sinai Peninsula. There's the Sinai mountain range. Go to that mountain over there. And you may remember that mountain because that's where the burning bush was, Moses. Go to that mountain over there and have everybody wait. You're going to wait for 3 days. Everybody's supposed to wash their clothes and no monkey business, but just going to chill. And at the end of 3 days, I will give you a guide. So the people go to the mountain, they camp out. God said, wash your clothes for some reason. I mean, these folks have been walking through the desert for a long time. Clothes are pretty dirty. God's coming to town. do your laundry. So everybody's waiting out by the mountain. And finally, on the morning of the third day, there's this tremendous sound, right? There's the sounds of shofars being blown. Maybe people had shofars with them, but there was like another shofar going on. There was thunder, there was lightning. It was very, very frightening. There was fire. It was crazy. And suddenly this voice comes out and says 10 things. And so this is the Aseret HaDibrot, or the Decalogue, also known as the 10 Commandments. In the Hebrew, it's actually the 10 Statements. And this was God giving God's first encouragement, guidance to us as a people. Up to that point, God had talked to Abraham. God had talked to various members of that family. God had talked to Moses, maybe to Aaron a little bit. But God hadn't spoken to everybody at once until that moment. And what that moment does is it answers a very important question. The question starts when we leave Egypt, right? We are now free. We can do anything we want. The question is, that being the case, what should we do? Now that we are a free people, how do we govern ourselves as a just people? How do we conduct our lives in a holy way? And so that's the question that is created by our liberation from Egypt at Passover. And after wandering in the wilderness, when we're really hungry for knowledge, we get the answer. Here is a guide to life for a free people. And that is now what we celebrate on Shavuot, because the rabbis in the Talmud figured out that it took them about 50 days to get there. Plus, then there's the camping, right? But on the 50th day, that about the 6th of Sivan, and some rabbis love to argue. Another rabbi said 7th of Sivan. But on the 6th of Sivan, we figured we got the Torah, happened to fall on the wheat harvest festival. And so look, as long as you're partying, let's party about this, because this is a big deal. If Passover is about our redemption as a people, of God remembering God's covenant with us and taking us out of Egypt and creating us as a nation, then this is the constitution of our nation. You can think of it a little bit like, this is how I think about it, is like we have 1776 and then we have 1789. I hope I got that date correct. It's been a while since I've been in civics class, but like we declare our independence as Americans. I know other people watching this aren't all Americans, but as Americans, we had to declare our independence. We had to fight for it. And then once we got it, we had to figure out what to do with it. And so we had the constitutional conventions put together. I know Thomas Jefferson was involved. And then years after our liberation, we have our revelation. We have the writing down of our principles that would be sacred to us as Americans. That's not a perfect comparison, but it's just a metaphor, right? First, we had to be liberated people. We had to be free people before we could be taught how to be responsible people. And so that is why we celebrate this holiday of Shavuot. It is the Feast of Weeks because it takes 7 weeks for us to get from Egypt to Mount Sinai. Then we get the Torah revealed to us. Actually, we just get the top 10 revealed to us as the story goes. After we hear these 10 very important things, the unity of God, respect for our elders, right? Honoring our mother and father, which I think is also honoring God and honoring our tradition. The commandment to celebrate Shabbat, which is the only ritual commandment in the top 10, but then a lot of other important principles of interpersonal human ethic, not murdering, not kidnapping, not messing with other people's relationships, not wanting stuff that other people have, but being happy with what we have. And after all of that, people were like, that's cool, but it's kind of loud. Moses, can you just go up to the top of the mountain and get the rest of this book? And he did. And he went up to the top of the mountain. He was there for 40 days and 40 nights. And our tradition holds that he took dictation on the rest of the Torah from God at that point. So that's what Shavuot is. It's the celebration of receiving the Torah from God at Mount Sinai. It coincides with a biblically ordained wheat harvest festival that is supposed to happen 50 days after Passover. I've got more to say about the traditions of Shavuot. You'll have to stick around for that for another video. And why do we eat cheesecake? What does any of this have to do with cheesecake? Stay tuned for that. Until next time, friends. Peace. God's coming to town. Do your laundry.